Today I am a son. Today I am in the vineyard. Today I am a servant. And I'm here with first, middle, and last name, please.
Patrick Donald Hess.
Donald, my man. So, Patrick Donald Hess, what does it mean to you to be a servant?
Okay,
The
yeah.
moment I've been
The
waiting
moment that I've been waiting
for
for.
so long.
Well, yeah, I mean, when I was thinking about what like being a servant is and like what it actually practically is like to serve other people, the one thing I kept thinking about like was just the amount of joy that I think it brings you to serve other people, like specifically in an increase of gratitude, I think. I know, so we're working at Catholic Youth Summer Camp in Northwoods in Wisconsin, and we're both counselors, but we worked in the kitchen together. I know that like working in the kitchen and seeing all the work that goes into like the food, it just like made me so grateful. And then being in the kitchen and doing all that work made me so joyful to be able to like see the look on these kids' faces when like they got strawberries for the yogurt bar that I had to spend 45 minutes cutting, like
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
that's beautiful. Yeah, I think joy is a big part of service. That I actually haven't, I don't think I've talked about that on any of my episodes so far. So I think we're probably going to dive into that a
Go
little bit more
for it.
since you brought it up. I also think that joy is a very important thing, and that's not joy is not something that comes easily for me personally. And I have noticed that joy is something that you exemplify very well, especially in your everyday life. You're always like in the moment. I think that's a big part of joy is like being in the moment because a lot of times I feel like human beings were like, I was thinking about something else besides what we're doing, and that steals us from like the person in front of us and like the beauty of whatever interaction is going on. And it seems like you have figured out a way to most of the time be in that moment and to see like the comedy of what's going on because there is like in order to laugh we need something to be funny. Like I've tried like forcing laughter and it doesn't work. Like you actually need to there needs to be something funny going on
Mhm.
for in order for it to be genuine.
Yeah,
Like for a while I had a theory that you could just like fake laugh and like event like we do kind of
I
do that
think
here a
that
little bit,
works.
but I think it's like there is something comedic about even the like
Yeah.
forced laughter. It's but I don't call it forced laughter. Actually, I came up with a different term for it today. Unconditional laughter. Like you laugh no
Regardless of what's
regardless of
happening.
if it's funny or not. Like if someone says a dumb joke, you just like as long as it's still like freedom and not freedom,
Yeah,
you
pretty
still
dumb.
you still like if someone intended something to be funny and it's not like a joke that's harmful to like anyone's dignity or like to God's creation, like it's a joke that's like it's amoral. You can unconditionally laugh at that, especially if it's someone like I've noticed like campers who are quieter. Like I try to reward their like speech, like when they do talk with like my like over the top engagement,
Mhm.
in order to draw them out of their shell. Have you ever thought about that before? Like using laughter as like a tool to like bring someone alive.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think being like an easy laugh is like, I really like it. I think that I laugh pretty easily.
Yeah,
At least like I try to. And yeah, and like
yeah. You don't
I
want to be
would,
a tough crowd.
yeah, exactly. And also like I really like humor and I really like making jokes because I also think that laughing, like when you can't help but laugh because something's just funny, like that also brings you out of yourself. You don't really have a choice. Like if you just like say a joke in a room full of people who don't want to talk to each other, and all of a sudden they're all laughing together, it's like
Yeah,
you've grown closer just because of
yeah,
that. So like if you can like do something ridiculous, because like really all that comedy is just pointing out some kind of like absurdity in the world. You're like,
yeah.
and I think that's why like doing the fake laugh, the unconditional laughter. I think that's why it sometimes makes you actually laugh, is because you look around, you're like in a room full of people, and all going like ha 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 ha. You're like, this is
Yeah.
like absurd. Why are we doing this? And then you
And
start
then it
actually laughing.
becomes real. Yeah. So that's
Um,
something that here at CYSC they have us do like on a weekly basis with the campers is like they'll say what we're all gonna laugh for like a minute. Like
mhm.
like laugh as hard as you like forcibly laugh as hard as you can for a minute. And it's funny to watch. It makes me laugh to watch campers
Mhm.
try not to laugh.
Yeah.
Like for some reason there's like enough weight on them of whatever it is, whatever like shame and like trauma they're dealing with, to make them like in something as pure as that not want to engage,
Mhm.
because it really is just like, why would you not want to laugh?
Yeah, like
Like
laughing is like
what's
the
holding
best.
you back? So it's like you can clearly, it's like a really good way to gauge like the level of like the depth of like the sin and the trauma and the shame that like a camper's in,
Mhm.
based on like how much they enter into something like that. Like the ones who are like just like, I won't laugh at all, even if you like look at me and like laugh, like
Mhm.
looking into my eyes, like making eye contact with them, and they still don't laugh. You know, like they've been through some stuff. And I think
Mhm.
that, especially this last week, that really held true. There was a guy who like, I don't think I saw him smile the whole first day, and uh, like I was at that point where we did the laughing thing. I like looked right in his eyes and was like hit on my shoulder, like laughing, and he's just, and it did turn out he had a very difficult upbringing,
Mhm.
and experienced a lot of trauma in his upbringing, a lot of just like relational strife, which I think closes people off from like wanting to be vulnerable like that, because it is vulnerable to laugh.
Mhm.
I think in a way, because it, like I think our laughs like carry a lot of, or like our smile and our joy carries a lot of power, and so like I feel like we are careful about when we laugh, which I think is like, in one way it is good. Like I think you can overstep the line and laugh too much.
Mhm.
Like you don't want to laugh in
Yeah.
every situation. Like you don't want to go to a funeral and just be like belly laughing during the
Yeah,
eulogy.
that's true.
So I think there's time and a place, and there's something to be said about that. What do you like? What you got any thoughts about that?
Well, yeah, I think also with laughing, it's like this is more just for some like certain people. Like sometimes somebody just laughs and they got like a really whack laugh, and it's like I don't know. Like sometimes someone laughs, you're just like, oh, like some people go like hee hee hee. Like I've heard it, like it's
Yeah.
real. Um, and so like I don't know. I think just in terms of, like being like people are like very self conscious, just like all of us are. It's really easy to get caught up in like, oh, like what will they think if I laugh at this joke? And like, yeah, it is like a sense of vulnerability. Like you're,
Yeah.
yeah, like I want to be like too cool for that joke or
Yeah.
whatever.
Mhm.
And you even had a camper this week who we were like when we were making fart noises during one of the talks just to like be silly. Um, and he like wouldn't do it. And then
Yeah.
you just like stood up and you're like, you are not too cool to make a fart noise. And like that was just hilarious because like you were pointing out like this absurdity that like a kid who's like 14 or 15 years old is like already like a grown up, and he's trying to
Yeah.
act so mature, which is
Yeah.
like
That you like
it like
trick yourself
yeah,
into thinking that that's what it means to be mature, is to like be stoic.
yeah, and be stoic and
But like
closed
there is a
off.
good thing about like stoicism, but it's not like you can't worship it. Like
Hmm.
I remember reading Seneca, if you've ever read
Yep, I read
Seneca,
Seneca
in like
too.
one of my first Catholic studies classes. And he was, I mean, Stoicism is a huge part of Christianity, like a lot of the sentiments of Stoicism in terms of like the virtues of like temperance and prudence,
Hmm.
um, in all things. But then, like, if you don't have the like whole picture of like the incarnation and um like the oh happy fault, then I feel like stoicism just turns into like like a somber sobriety that's
Hmm.
like very just like dry. There's not a lot of life in it, so I think it's like just like an, oh, and I think that tends to happen in our Catholic faith too. I feel like with like too heavy of a weight put on like the things that we do, like too heavy a weight put on like, oh, how much am I like, fasting, how much am I like doing this, like a very pharisaical
Hmm.
um disposition towards the faith that I think can bleed into our faith, and that I think has bled into our faith in our current culture in the church, to the point that like young people don't want to be involved at all because it looks like no fun. And
Yeah.
because everyone's just like somber and is like, sackcloth and ashes. The
Hmm.
people who are like seem to be into the faith are like sackcloth and ashes, and it's like I want my life to be more than that. Like I want
Hmm.
like there's a time for sackcloth and ashes, but there's also a time for like dancing and
Yeah.
rejoicing. And I think that's like the dichotomy of the faith that like has to be there in order for it to be balanced. That sometimes is not there, and like in our current culture is not there, and that's like what we're battling against here, is like that like super contrasted balance of like the traditional and the charismatic. Like in mass, like we say Latin during mass, and we have the smells and the bells,
Mhm.
but we also have the guitar and the cajon and
Yeah.
the the worship, using our bodies in worship, and that I think that combination is what really brought my faith to life. And I think that's like a really good example of like, all right, so we have two sides of our temperaments, the introverted and the extroverted. Some of us lean, we all lean towards one or the other. But if we're called to be all things to all people, should we completely negate one to the like the benefit of the other? Is that the proper disposition? Like if we lean too far into introversion, how are we going to be able to like relate to people who are extroverted? How are we
Mhm.
going to be able to lead them to the faith? Think about
Yeah. Well, you said many things. So I'll go back to one of
that.
them. Well, I mean, you were talking about like sackcloth and ashes. I think that one thing that's often overlooked is that like Lent is supposed to be a joyful season and like a penitential one, like
Yeah,
obviously. And that's like what everybody gets right for the most part, I would say. But it's kind of rare to see like the joy coming out of it a lot of times. I know for myself in high school, I was like very much into the penitential side of it, and like
yeah.
I would do, like
Exodus
Exodus 90
90.
all 4 years, and all that stuff. And I was like, ah, like this is so awesome, taking cold showers. But it was like very joyless. It was a very joyless time, and a lot of it came from like the interior disposition that I wanted to show the Lord, like at Easter, like look at how good I can like
Mhm.
become for you. But the whole point of Easter is that like we're terrible. Like like the whole point
Mhm.
of Easter is that like Christ loved us while we were still sinners. And this is love, not that we have loved God, but that He has loved us and sent His Son as the expiation for our sins. And like, yeah, I don't know if you don't. I feel like that's one of the reasons why people focus so much on penance is because they want to earn God's love, which can't be earned. Um, and like when you're trying to do that, like that does take away all the joy. That's the
Mhm.
same reason why so many other people in the world are joyless, is because they're trying to earn affirmation from other people. And like I mean it's different to earn affirmation from people and affirmation from God. Um, insofar as like I want affirmation from God, I want to be holy in His sight, like,
Yeah.
and He's gonna make me holy in His sight. He's the only one who can. But when you're seeking affirmation from other people, it's always a moving target.
Mhm.
But when you're seeking affirmation from God, it's like an unreachable target by yourself. So
Mhm.
no matter how, it's like whether if you're living your life to try and like earn something for yourself, whether it's from God or from others, without the help of God, then like it's just it's gonna be
Mhm.
joyless because it's almost hopeless, like
Yeah.
to try and make yourself into a saint. Like no, God has to make you holy. Um,
Yeah. That's a really interesting point about just like theology and our relationship to God. That that even in the depths of our sin, like at our lowest point, we're still loved the same as we are now that we have stepped into our faith, which is kind of cool to think about how that works, and how that like doesn't that like how that doesn't mean we should be complacent, um,
mm,
but it also like means that we should somehow for some reason we should still like want that. I think it's just like natural to like want more depth in our relationship with God, even though and to it like to want to do good, even though it doesn't make God love us anymore, and there's like not any like immediate reward. I think it's obviously like not true to say there's not any reward. Like we're all seeking after that reward of like eternal life. So I think there is a reward. It's just like there's one reward, and it's a long term goal.
mm. Yeah, I would say like the Lord rewards us now, I think, for doing good as well. Not always, um, it's not always like super tangible, but
We can taste heaven. We get
little
little
taste of it,
appetizers.
yeah. little cutscenes. But I mean, yeah, like Jesus said that whoever leaves father, mother, and home and all that for him will receive all this and 100 times more in this life and in the next. And so like I think that we certainly get an aspect of that, and I think that like working here has been a testament to that. Like this is such a joyful place,
Yeah.
full of like such good people. And yeah, like being here has been a great like consolation and reward. Like that almost like makes all the hardships of the last year or whatever that we're leading up to this. They
Yeah.
just kind of seem like nothing
Mhm.
when you're in it.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I don't know. I think that like when just like when you love someone, you have to love what they love. Like
Mhm.
at least to some extent, at least you can't hate it. So like if you're getting married and like your fiance's mom is just like crazy, so you have like this crazy mother-in-law,
Yeah.
you can't just be like, oh no, I'm just gonna hate her. Like all of a sudden, like you're no longer getting married. Whoa, I think you're
I thought that
good.
was gonna hold up. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you saying?
Um, but yeah, so it's like if you love God, then you rejoice in what He rejoices in, you delight what He delights in, and one of those things is like doing well, like doing good actions, like being virtuous. And yeah, like He wants that for you for your own good. It's not like He wants it so
Mhm.
that you're good enough for Him. He just wants it because He knows
Yeah.
it'll make you happy to
Yeah.
act well.
One of the things I've been thinking about a lot recently related to joy, in my own like struggle to find joy in like certain moments, certain days, is like the fact that we're called to put ourselves third. Like that saying that I mean I always heard that growing up, like um, God, others, yourself, in that order. And it's interesting to think about how that plays out in our work, in our everyday lives, and how we only like we only physically see others, but in loving them, we're actually putting God first. Like in choosing to bring them joy, and to sort of making them the center of our attention, and putting them before ourselves, we are like putting God at first. Um, and so it's like it, even though like I wrote in my journal the other day, like make others the center of your attention. And then like at first I was like, wait, like I thought I was supposed to make God like first. And I was like, well, that is making God first, because that's what God desires from me. That He says the first commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and the second commandment is love your neighbor as yourself. And like the two are not like, one can't be without the other in our
Hmm.
life. Like we are made for unity, and to be like a body, united body in Christ. And so that's just like really interesting to think about how we are like in making others first, we're actually making God first. And
Hmm.
in the order of it, if you want to think about it in like an order that is putting God before others, because there is another way of like seeing that, where if you're putting others first, you're just like you're like placing all your validation in others, looking for affirmation in others, like you were talking about earlier. So that's like a minute distinction. What is your experience of homeless ministry and finding joy in that?
Oh, I haven't done all that much of it. Um, I've had one like super good experience with this woman whose name was Liz, and she was outside of the basilica. Actually, she was like under the little parking garage.
Yeah.
And like yeah, I mean like in that, in terms of putting others first, like I mean Jesus said, "Whatever you do to the least of my brothers, you do unto me."
Yeah.
So in a very real way, it's like you're serving the Lord. You get to like see His hands and His feet, and you get to like wash His feet. And yeah, I think that like I think it's like it's kind of hard for me to do homeless ministry. But like there have been a lot of negative experience that I've had too, with people. Just like people are crazy sometimes, and like
Yeah.
they do crazy things. But probably like the part that like has made me like the most sorrowful when I've been there is like seeing people who are so closed off to like
Mhm.
having any kind of human interaction, just because they're so like they've just
Mhm.
been so wounded, so broken. There's so much brokenness
Yeah.
there, and like just yeah, just like how oh, yeah, just how difficult it is to like have any amount of trust with them. Like this lady who she had a walker. She was older. She was
Mhm.
like 75, I think she said.
Mhm.
She'd been homeless for 12 years. And you know, like she had a walker and she kind of thank you.
Got you.
She saw me. And I was maybe like 50 yards away. I was pretty far.
Mhm.
But it was like obvious she was just like a homeless lady,
Mhm.
um, chilling, and I wanted to bring her some food. And like she was like scared of me when I was walking over. I'm like not
Mhm.
a very intimidating person. Like let me tell you, I'm tall, but like that's all I got. Um, and so and she was short and she was sitting on her walker and all that, and like just how reluctant she was to even like make eye contact and stuff. That really broke my heart.
You walked up to her and you, like, said, "Hey, I've got food," and she
I was
just
like, "Hey, do you
kind of
want food?"
ignored
And
you?
yeah, she was kind of looking down. She's like, "Yeah, yeah, I'll take it." But then I was able to like sit, and I was like, "Hey, do you mind if I like sit here while
Mhm.
you eat?" And she was like, "Oh yeah, sure, that's fine." And then like we were able to talk for like almost a half hour, but like the
Yeah.
first 10 minutes of that was just so much like building trust and just like realizing that my life had given such a privilege to like be able to trust people easily, just because of
Yeah.
like how I've been brought up. Is like the people that I meet are usually trustworthy, you know, like
Uh-huh.
um, and that like I don't know. I think that that's something that really helps with just those basic moments that are so human, like just meeting someone and being like, "Hey, like, what's up?"
Yeah.
Like, I expect, like, I'm gonna ask you what your name is, and like, I expect you to tell the truth. You know, like, she like,
Right.
yeah, like there was doubt in her mind of like that I wasn't who I said I was, and like, you know,
She
stuff like
said that to
this.
you?
Yeah, yeah, just like I was like, no, I'm just here like giving out food, and she was like, no way, like just like couldn't believe that she was could be loved
Yeah.
by a stranger like that. You
It's
know,
kinda
like,
crazy that a lot of homeless people, I don't know if you've ever had this happen to you, are so homeless that they, like, won't tell you their name because they feel
hmm
like they've lost so much, like, connection that to expose their name would be, like, somehow, like, putting them in danger. I've
yeah,
had that happen to me before where I'll ask someone's name and they'll say, like, I don't give out my name." Um,
because it's all I got. You know,
yeah,
like,
it's like all they got left in the world. Like, that makes sense on that level too. But in that way, it is very sad. But the thing I think about homeless ministry that is edifying is the fact that people who are physically homeless are like a physical representation of what we all are spiritually.
mhm,
Like they live out their physical life in the same way that we all live out our spiritual life. Like we are all homeless in our lives
mhm,
spiritually. Like we are all looking for home, which is in heaven. And like I think the reason why they're so down to earth, a lot of times the like I've talked to homeless people who are like they they are a little closed off at first, but then once you like start talking to them, they like everything. There's blows wide open. They start telling you their whole story,
mhm,
and they're like not afraid of vulnerability. Like they'll expose it all. They'll lay it all down before you, um, and be super open in conversation. And I think that's like how we all are at the moment of like that, like hitting rock bottom. Like comes a time when like we all can highlight like a moment. It's for some of us it's a lot lower than others when either like our mental health or our physical health was so and our spiritual health were like so bad that like we had no choice but to like lay it all open and bare.
mhm,
And that for a lot of those campers that come here, that's usually like our prayer ministry night when they tell us what they want prayer for, personally, like whether that's anxiety, depression, something they need physical healing for, like broken relationships, a broken family. We all like come to a point when we're like willing to lay it all bare, in a way like that's for all of us is like a microcosm of like the homelessness that people are physically homeless without like a place or like a roof over their head, live under each and every day, that they're like so exposed to the elements and to like just like everyone, like in everyone's questioning and everyone's um interaction. So it's like I was out and about. Um, yeah, I think it's just like really interesting to think about how that can lead us to understand our own situations better by talking to them and getting to know them. This past semester, I uh, was in Catholic Studies leadership interns at St. Thomas, and we talked about poverty and did a lot of like field trip stuff to ministries that um, did homeless ministry in some way, shape, or form. And we visited this one place called the Marin House, which is basically just like two families that like live across the street from one another, and then they have a third house that they use as like a homeless shelter, pretty much, where they just have like a few homeless people that they've met live there, and they just live with them, and like they become part of their family, and they help them get like if they need like medical appointments, they'll bring them there, whatever it is they need, like a ride to work, whatever it is, they just coexist together in community, almost like what the early like Christian communities were like, right after Jesus left. How they would like, regardless of like class or status, they would all live in community together, united, um, under the umbrella of the faith. Which is it was just like super cool to see how much unity that brings, and how like down to earth that makes like the family that's living with them, and like how I could see that that would breed holiness in the children as they grow up,
Mm-hmm.
because I think a lot of our pride comes from not wanting to be like exposed, not wanting to people to see that we're wounded, and if you grew up with homeless people, that would just be like not that would not be an issue for you,
Yeah.
because like you're your family with people who are so exposed, and so you just learn to like live life, um, in such an open way, in such a vulnerable way. And as we know, I was all last week I was telling my campers like from that Thomas, um, from like the after the feast of St. Thomas the Apostle, I was just like all I think about was like, boys, we have to be vulnerable, because it's in like putting or allowing people to put their like fingers in like our wounds, that we not only do we experience healing, but they experience healing, and not only do we experience an increase of faith, but they experience an increase of faith.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and I think through that all, and that whole experience of like coming to understanding of your homelessness, there's like a peace that results in joy in that, and like an allowance for joy, because you no longer are like hiding anything. I think that comes back to what we were talking about how a lot of people are very careful about when they are joyful, because there's something very vulnerable about being joyful, about
Mm-hmm.
smiling, because I think smiling draws people to you.
Mm.
And so if you smile, people are going to want to know why. And if you don't want people to know the why about yourself, you're not going to want to smile.
Yeah, I know that we both go to St. Thomas, and at St. Thomas, like, just one thing that I try to do is like, well, I don't even like really try to do it, I just do it. It's like whenever I pass someone on the sidewalk, I just like look at their eyes and like I just smile at them because I'm just like, that's what I do. Like that's always
Yeah.
how I've done it. And like there are a lot of times when you'll see someone and you'll smile at them, and they'll just look up at you and she'll like look right back
Yeah.
down. And so in that
Because if
way,
they
like,
smile back, they'll like the chances of y'all having an interaction will increase
yeah,
exponentially.
or just like giving in and being like, oh yeah, I'm joyful. Like I don't know, I don't
Yeah.
know what it is honestly, but um, that and then that's one thing where it's like then like the next person, I'm a little nervous. I'm like, what if like I get rejected in this? Because that's what it feels like. It's
Yeah.
like in that way, being joyful is like, like what if I'm like so excited and like I'm so joyful, and then I just get rejected by people who like don't want to
Hmm.
share that. Because one thing we talked about in our formation here at this camp is that like joy is a communal. It exists particularly in community, and like you can have people
Hmm.
who are joyful alone, and like I'm usually pretty joyful when I'm alone. I like to think, but it really comes alive when you have people around you to like be joyful with, in a particular way. And so when you try and like bring that to people and they reject it, I feel like that's a fear that like that comes to me as someone who
Hmm.
like was just gifted by the Lord to like be joyful like all the time,
Mm,
pretty much. You know, like
yeah,
um, and like it's also like it's a choice to be joyful. You know, like I don't have to smile. I just like to.
yeah,
So, um, yeah, and then also like about homeless people. You're talking about a lot about like spiritual homelessness representing our or their physical homelessness representing our spiritual homelessness. And I also just like love to think about their physical poverty is like our spiritual poverty.
yeah,
Um, and that's like and it's not just like some way to like use them as like a tool to better understand the spiritual life and like miss the person, but I found it to be a way to like relate
mhm,
um, as someone who like has really not had to deal with
mhm,
any kind of material poverty my whole life.
yeah,
Um, but like all of us have to deal with spiritual poverty. And like, oh yeah, yeah, I feel like oftentimes that's been a help for me to be able to better relate to them is that like we're actually all poor. And some of us are materially poor, but all of us are spiritually poor, and that's been like a good common ground for me.
yeah,
It's also been really interesting for me. My first semester, every week I would go to Mary's Place, which is
yeah,
we tutor like homeless middle schoolers basically, and most of them are a few grades below like where they should be based on their age, just because of the fact that they maybe just starting school now when they're like 8, or whatever.
yeah,
And like yeah, what you said about their vulnerability was just like so true because like I would be teaching a 12-year-old who like doesn't know how to read, and like just like seeing like imagining myself in his shoes and like all of my pride that would come up to be like I don't want to be weak to you. Like I'm 12 years old, I should know how to read by now.
yeah,
Like I don't want to be weak. But then to just see this kid who just like looked at me and was like you're my tutor. Like I don't know how to read this book, and like can you help me? And like yeah, like the vulnerability that they have is like insane, especially among the kids, I think, because they realize like they've never I don't know, I feel like sometimes people get like knocked off, like we said, you get knocked off of your horse, like get off your high horse.
mhm,
They were just like born like on the ground.
yeah, yeah, they were never
Like
on
like
the
like
horse.
and like I don't know, I feel like that is just that there's like so much hope in that like these kids like and a lot of them like this is like their first opportunity to go to a school, and like they could be like the first
Mhm,
people in their family for like 80 years to get to go
yeah,
to college or something like that. I had like 3 kids who were like that. They're like me and my family's been homeless for like 3 generations or something like that, which just like you can only imagine like how deeply that like wounds the family
mhm,
structure. But just the amount of hope that their vulnerability brings through like letting just some stranger who like
yeah,
they've only met today, who they're not going to see again for like a week,
yeah,
just like teach them how to read, and like seeing so much of these things like I myself would have been prideful about, and like
mhm,
these kids, to them it's just like they just realize that they're in need, and that like
yeah,
how much more I should approach other people like that, how much more I should approach the Lord
yeah.
like that in prayer.
Another realization off of that is the fact that material poverty actually disposes us for spiritual wealth and allows like an openness for that because our like infatuation with um, material wealth like blocks us off from that and like this all the scripture about like it's hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven um, holds so true because of like the massive distraction that is and how it just breeds self-interest um, to like acquire all that wealth. Whereas like the way you acquire spiritual wealth is through virtue.
Mm,
Um, and without the distraction of like the vice that comes with acquiring material wealth, like homeless people, they just a lot of them don't have hope for material wealth, so they just
mm,
don't worry about it.
mm,
And that allows them to like accept that fact and enter in fully to um, amassing spiritual wealth. I can't tell you how many times I've met a homeless person who like even though like nothing else seems to be going well in their life, if I ask them if they're Christian, they'll like admit it a little bit and like say that they have a rosary or something. And it's not to say that they're like going super deep in their faith, but they cling to it
Mhm.
to some degree. They don't have anyone forming them. So I can only imagine that if they did have someone forming them, if they're in like have that where they're like clinging to that already, like they would they'd run head first into their faith, if they had somebody there to like guide them in it and to like walk like a community to walk with in their faith.
Yeah, and I've even heard, testimonies of, like, religious that I've known who've just talked about how living, like, community life and, like, renouncing all of your physical possessions just, like, has so disposed them to, like, renounce sin. Like, it's just, like, when you give up, like, this focus on yourself and, like, what you have,
Mm-hmm.
like, sin is just, like, naturally less attractive, and in my own experience in the seminary, like, when I like, 'cause we all have different, like, chores on the floor that you live on,
Mm-hmm.
and, like, when I'm cleaning the bathroom, like, I clean toilets, that's, like, what I do, and I love it,
Mm-hmm.
and it is, like it is so joyful, like, me cleaning them toilets, like, I'm so happy when I'm doing it,
Yeah.
um, and then I got home, this summer, and I was just, like, thinking, I was like, "You know what? Let's keep on, keeping my living space in order." And I was like, "I wanna go clean the bathrooms." And, like, I have, like in my room, like, just 'cause big family and then a bunch of people moved out because they all got old. We had, I have, like, my own bathroom, but, like, only I use.
Yeah.
And I was like, "No, like, there's, like, no reason to clean this, cause like, what made me so joyful was that I could see, like, my brothers who I love, and I was like, "You know what? Like, you deserve to have a clean toilet,"
Yeah.
and it's just like and I know that they take care of me, like, they mop the floor every day, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that so much.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, in that way, like, living in community and even here, like, keeping our communal spaces clean,
Yeah.
there's just, like, a different level of joy because it brings
Mm-hmm.
that good into so many other people's
Mm-hmm.
lives too, and it's like, when it's all about you, it's like, I'm fine living in filth, but, like,
Yeah.
I want better for you. It's sometimes easier
Yeah.
in my experience to, like, want more for my brothers than I do for myself in those ways.
Yeah. And shameless plug, this is the minimum viable product for a potential ministry that creates community around material poverty. So there you go.
Wait, what is?
It's been real. Peace.
Okay, bye.